Okay, we are live. Terry Mcdougall, welcome to Executive Talk. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Aaron?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for taking the time and coming on our show. It's wonderful to have you.
It's really great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, so much my pleasure. Is it still time? Can I still say Happy New Year? Like, are we still in a good grace
I
period for
think
that?
so. I think we need all of the well wishes that we can get for a happy new year, for a happy year.
For a happy year, for a good year. That's true. Did you do anything to at least celebrate or take a break or relax at all to be able to initiate this new year with something, something good?
My husband and I, dressed up a little bit for New Year's Eve and got takeout and had some drinks and watched some stuff on TV. And that was really nice. You got to celebrate even if we can't do the things we normally do. And
That's
then
true.
I did sort of initiate the year by starting a new podcast too. So that's nothing like having a new project to kick off the new year.
I'm all in favor of that, and I think podcasts are a great project to work on. So I think that's wonderful. I'm excited to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Exactly as you were saying before, I think, even if we don't celebrate in the ways that we normally are used to celebrating, I still think it's important to be able to do something to allow that celebration. You know what I mean, Len? So
Oh,
even if it's,
absolutely.
of course, even if it's different, it's still so important to find ways to celebrate opportunities and experiences in any way that we can. It does so much
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah. I think, I wouldn't say that COVID it's obviously been horrible, right? But I think that one of the lessons coming out of it is really to remain present and count your blessings no matter what
Yeah.
they are. And there have been some nice things, with I have 3 kids and all my kids are back home and we didn't see them a lot before and we get to see them a lot more now, and we've kind of started some new traditions where we
Yeah.
go out in the Midwest here. We play this game called bags or cornhole, where you toss bean bags and try to get it in the hole in the board. And
Okay. Sure.
we used to just play that occasionally, and it's become like, especially when the weather was warmer, it was like an every night thing. And
Right.
I feel like we were building some fun memories that we would not have done had we been forced to. There was nothing else to do.
You got to create your own activity and fun.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's great. The bringing on more family time. Look, I have 4 kids, and so, but my kids are younger and they spend a lot of time at home. So, anyways, and so it's, sometimes it's, oh my, this is so great, I love you guys, hey, let's have fun today. And then the other time is, I'm closing the door, get out of my face, just I don't care what you do, but don't do it near me. And
no hitting, but besides that, don't come unless somebody's breathing or bleeding.
No yelling, no hitting, no crying, feed yourself if you need to.
Yeah.
And we'll be done with it in a little bit. No, I get it. Look, I think it's weird. I think I'm weird when when people talk about this year of COVID. Everyone, I totally appreciate and understand what it's done, how it's impacted individuals, communities, networks, life, work, everything, right? I totally understand that. And I definitely am not downplaying those intensities at all, right? Not at all. But that being said, is maybe it's the optimist in me, but I look at this past year and I say, wow, what a year for breakout in technology. What a year
definitely.
for, innovation. What a year for learning business flexibility. What a year for, for such amazing uses of creativity, and innovation in ways that we've never had before. What a year in springboarding businesses and entrepreneurship and a whole variety of innovation where if we weren't challenged with that aspect, over this past, 9, 10, 12 months,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't have, we wouldn't have like flown out so much, as far as we would have, as we would have. And so, as much frustration that this past year came, it's also important to be able to look at the positive effects that happened, that turned into that, and that people, appreciated and learned from, right? The opportunity for people to learn how to be flexible when it comes to where you work and how you work, and
Yeah.
how you make income, and how you use technology, and how you stimulate your creativity, how you spend time with people. There's so much to that you should be, that really stands out to me as the positive side of it. And so I try really hard not to forget that side.
I agree. I agree 100%. And I really believe that the adoption of, Zoom and some of the other virtual technologies that empower us to work virtually, I think that the adoption has been fast forwarded by like 10 years in 10
Excellent.
months.
Yeah.
And, I also agree with what you're saying in terms of how this has really shifted how we look at, where do we work? What's necessary? I mean, the last place that I worked full time was already moving towards empowering people to work from home more. And in fact, they had done away with individual uh, workspaces, offices, and cubicles, and had gone to sort of that hotel model where you had to sign out your workspace. And I know that part of the idea and also part of the carrot for getting people to adopt that was that they'd be able to work from anywhere. They'd be able to work from home. But,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us were a little skeptical about how much of that was going to be allowed. But I really think that a lot of companies are going to probably not renew leases. They're
Yeah.
going to really re-examine, who do we need? And also, actually, I was quoted in an article earlier in the year about my opinion, or the opinion about, with remote working, how would that impact salaries, right?
Right.
Because if somebody lives in the Silicon Valley, they're going to have to be paid differently than if they live in, the middle of Nebraska or someplace. But really, I think it's going to provide a lot of freedom for both individuals, but also for companies to, find the best talent and
Right.
not be constrained by geography.
Right. 100%. 100%. Cool. So, well, anyways, on that note, here's to an amazing year of continued growth and innovation, and always being able to see the positive in,
Yeah.
all of the steps that we take forward for, a wonderful and successful year.
Yeah.
So, all right. Welcome to Executive Talk Podcast. It is wonderful to have you here, Terry Mcdougall. You are an executive and career coach. You are author of the best-selling book, Winning the Game of Work. It is amazing to have you here and to be chatting with you.
So glad to be here. I'm trying to
I,
talk. One of my favorite topics to talk about winning at work.
So we have a lot to talk about today. We're gonna talk about your book. I want to hear about it. I'd love to understand your process about how you got there. But a lot of our listeners are also business-minded folks, and one of the ways that we learn from one another, and this is actually one of the goals of our podcast here, is to get the opportunity to talk to one another in order to learn from one another. And so we're going to, I want to find out about your business. I want to learn about how you built it. I want to learn about, your authorship. And let's start from the beginning. So firstly, tell us about how you got into executive and career coaching. Where did you start from, and how did you get to the point where you are today?
Well, I guess it started. I can't even pinpoint where it really started. I've thought back and I thought, I'm the oldest of 4 girls, and I think being a big sister, I was always a helper. I was always interested in helping other people solve their problems. That's something that I did even, when I first got out of college. I would help people set their resumes up. And yeah, I just was always really interested in helping other people solve problems. And certainly as a marketing leader, I did that. I was also very ambitious in my own career. I am a first generation college graduate, so I didn't really have
Wow.
anybody to model for me what it looks like when you get out of college and how do you build a career. So I did what I'd always done, which was, I read books and I just was curious and really tried to absorb a lot of information. But, I did okay in my career, but I did not feel like I was advancing at the pace that I wanted to. And at one point I kind of, I don't know what you would call it. I guess I hit an obstacle. It was a little painful. Maybe we can go into detail later about what that obstacle was, but it just caused me to sort of wake up and say, I think there's something called like a career coach or something. And so I found someone who helped me, kind of understand a bit more how I could advocate for myself within the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me tremendously. It actually helped me make a pretty big shift in my career. It set me on a different trajectory. And also, I would say I had some good mentors along the way that kind of pulled back the curtain a bit about what really goes on within business and what you need to do in order to add value and get credit for the value that you
Sure.
add. And
Uh-huh.
so, when I left my job in 2017, I left because there were some like restructuring and that kind of thing going on. And I just didn't really see a place for myself going forward there. I'd been there for 12 years. I'd pretty much done everything that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I started thinking about, what do I want to do next? I was in a position where I could leave without having another job right away. And I wanted a little time to just think about what was next.
Yep.
And I decided, well, I took a look at, this is what I tell my clients to do. Like, what do you like to do? And what are you good at? And so I thought about those two things and I thought, I'm good at coaching. I loved coaching and mentoring the people that were on my staffs. I got feedback that I was good at it and I'd
Yeah.
hired coaches. So I thought, well, while I'm spending this time sort of figuring out what's next, why don't I just get a certification in coaching? And I thought that I'd get another job and I just kind of had this in my back pocket. But as I was going through the program, it just occurred to me, like, why not just do this full time? You love it.
Right.
I love business. I have an MBA. I always loved consulting within the organizations that I worked in to develop the marketing strategies and all of that. I love business people, and
Right.
so I just decided to, kind of combine these two things that I really love. So the coaching, my love for business, and
Right.
also my desire to help people. And so I've been doing it. I had clients before I got out of my program, but I've been doing it in earnest full time since January of 2018.
Great. That's awesome. Now, you work with executives from top tier companies across all major industries. Tell
Yeah.
me something. How hard is it to work with these folks? Are they impossible to teach? Are they amendable to suggestion? Like, what's it like working with that population?
Well, of course, it runs the gamut, but and it often depends on whether they have come into coaching willingly. I mean, people that have hit a pain point and they've been living with it, and they finally wake up and say, "I got to do something different."
Right.
Those are usually people that are pretty easy to work with.
Hmm.
We'll really dig into, like, okay, what's going on here? Is it a skill? Is it a skill set that needs to be developed? Is it a belief that's standing in the way of you showing up and doing the things that you need to do to get a different outcome? Those kind of folks usually are pretty easy to work with. And I would say also the beauty of working with high achieving people is that
Yeah.
they want to achieve, they want to see a difference, and they know that they're going to have to sort of evolve and they're usually good students as well. That
Right.
they're eager. Um, but when things maybe don't go as well, is usually when somebody's been sent to coaching and they don't believe that they need it.
Right.
And it's just like in sports, right? If you're not willing to listen to the feedback that your coach gives you, probably nothing's going to change.
Right.
so, you can only be coached if you want to be coached.
Correct. 100%. Look, that first rule of of leadership and growth really is, if you have to be amendable to the process, or you know what I mean? You have to
Yes.
be able to put your own ego aside for the sake of the cause that you're fighting for, in order
Hmm.
to be able to allow yourself to take in the parts that you need in order to let you get to that next step. Otherwise, you are always going to be a bottleneck for your own success and
Sure.
your own growth, and you won't get anywhere.
Hmm.
You'll just end up keep doing the same thing again and again and
Right.
again and again.
The definition of insanity, right? Keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. But
Yeah.
listen, I understand that people who are used to getting positive results and winning, that it can be hard when they're not getting the results that they want. And
Right.
so, I understand this. I mean, I was an executive. I understand that it's hard whenever something doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go, or, you had a failure, or um, uh, you know, you were disappointed. I
Right.
understand these things, right? And the coaching environment is an intimate one, right? People can let their hair down, and they can
Right.
talk to me about what their real feelings are, because a lot of times in the corporate world, you've got to sort of like remain stoic and,
Right.
authoritative, even if you don't feel that way, right?
Right.
And this is a safe place to say, I'm really bugged by this person, or, I get nervous when I have to present in front of the board, or whatever.
Right.
And that's okay.
See,
It's normal. It's
see,
normal.
that's so normal. See, I'm a big believer and component that leaders need to be able to show seasons of emotion. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
it can't be summer all the time.
Hmm.
And that, and look, a leader needs to be able to inspire and to lead on a regular
Hmm.
basis, right? They have
Yep.
to be able to position themselves and their team in order to be able to constantly be producing, challenging themselves to the next step and succeeding, right? So, there's definitely a mentality there. But that being said, I think it's also okay and acceptable for a leader to be able to show frustration,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
to express, sadness, and to feel doubt. The challenge becomes, though, is how do you sorry is how do you let your guard down, so to speak,
Hmm.
while not getting stuck in that, and still allowing yourself to keep the overall momentum moving forward.
Hmm. Yeah, I would say, there's a saying, and I can't remember who said it. It was probably like Maya Angelou or someone, about how people may forget what you said, but they
Yeah,
won't forget how you made them feel.
right. She was
And I,
right. She was talking about teachers, right? Is that
yeah,
you'll forget, right? You'll forget what you learned, but you'll never forget how you felt, right? When you
exactly.
during the process, right?
And one of the things that I feel like I kind of did this just intuitively, but when things are frustrating at work as a leader, I always resented it when somebody didn't acknowledge that maybe something that we were being asked to do didn't make sense,
Right,
or seemed unfair, or something like that. It didn't mean we
right,
didn't still have to do it, but when people were like, "Oh no, this is a good thing. We should be happy about this." If it's not if it's something that's unfair, or it makes you mad, like, I with my
right,
team, I would always say, I know it makes me mad too, like, I understand this. It's natural that you'd feel frustrated by this.
right.
I'm going to be there with you as you're feeling this,
Yeah,
and we have to still do it, and I'm sorry, right?
yeah,
But I feel like, and I mean, I didn't realize it when I was doing this, I just kind of felt like it made sense to acknowledge the feelings in the room. But I think that made people feel more loyal, right? Because they
yeah,
were like, she gets it, she understands. And
yeah,
certainly I felt like that when people had acknowledged my feelings and didn't, shame me for feeling a certain way, or made it
right.
seem like I had to be sort of like a robot and just, you
Yeah.
know, It wasn't like I wasn't going to do my job, but sometimes
Right.
things don't make sense and you want to express that.
And that's fair. Look, when you're building a team and you're working with a team, one of your biggest assets and strengths is your communication, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
that being said, now you have to let your team in to a certain amount of the process. Now,
Right.
you got to be careful of that because they're not the bosses either. In other words, and there's some information that they're just
Yeah.
not privy to, and it's
No.
not necessary to bring them in on. But on all the pieces of information and process that they can come in on,
Mm-hmm.
the more that you communicate that process with your team, the more you're
Mm-hmm.
going to build out, not only camaraderie, but you're going to build team building success, all,
Absolutely.
with a group of people who want to all strive together and achieve that next level that you're all working for, and
Yeah. I was going to say that, like, as a leader, a couple of the things that I think are really important in order to, encourage followership is to paint a very clear picture of what the goal is, right? So to talk about where are we going, why are we going there, and
yeah,
then importantly, to provide context for how they fit into it,
yeah,
right? So then that they start to understand their why, and also, like you were saying, like that teamwork and that sense of camaraderie, when everybody understands, like, oh, I understand how I'm going to contribute to this, right?
right.
I heard somebody talking the other day about um, how, like, somebody who ran like a sports stadium, that how they really motivated the maintenance staff is they made them part of the bigger goal, which was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, we want our baseball team to, make it to the playoffs this year. And they would, say to the groundskeepers, like, okay, well, you guys are part of, our winning team effort here,
Yeah.
right? And so that if you're out there riding a lawnmower, doing the crosshatch on the outfield for
Yeah.
hours, I'm sure it feels better if you know that, hey, I'm contributing to the success of this team rather than I'm just out
100%.
here mowing a huge lawn.
100%. And the more that you can create that level of ownership in everyone's role,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? In other words,
Right.
that like you're not trying to get your team to be like you, right? The success
Right.
of a strong
No.
team is that everyone can be them in their best possible capacity in the role that they're in.
Hmm.
you
Yes,
know and and
absolutely.
and let them thrive in that. And
Hmm.
the more that you capture all of those pieces for each of those individuals, the more they're going to say, let's do this, and the more they're just going to
Hmm.
get into it, and they're all going to be part of that winning cycle you know
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Sometimes when I've seen people that I've worked with who've had issues with getting that kind of engagement, it is because they have been afraid to let go of something. And particularly when people have, moved to the next level, a lot of times they don't really think about, how do I mentally promote myself to this next level? And what does that require of the people under me?
right,
Because I think that it really requires to take a look at what's my highest value work. And for me to do that, what do I need to delegate? And if
right.
I'm going to delegate this, what does that mean? Like, okay, I'm going to have to spend some time training or thinking about who's the best person to give this to. And when you give it to them, you set the expectations and of
Right.
course you train them, but you allow them to do it in their own way, right? They're not
You have to
you.
trust them that they
Yeah.
will do it well. They won't do it like
Hmm.
you, and that's okay. It's totally
Right.
okay if they're not doing it like you, but you need to trust. If you're hiring them to do it, it's because you think they can, and now you have to trust that they will.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So you started your business roughly, like, formally, you said around 2018. Now here we are
Hmm.
at 2021, and you have been, you are all over the place. You are growing. You are really, like, you've established yourself as an authority in this space. How did you build that business? What were some of the steps that you actively took to market yourself, to brand yourself? Like, walk us through
Hmm.
what some of your process was to get you to this point and for those next stages afterwards.
Well, I wish I could say that there was a big grand plan to begin with. I started by reaching out to my network.
Okay.
And my first clients came through my network.
Okay.
And I would say that, my network is my gold mine, right?
Okay.
It's really the culmination of my entire career, right? Because I actually have people that hired me that I worked with at my first job when I was 22. Which I'm thankful that I, had
All
good
right.
character
All right.
and stuff
Good.
back
Nice.
then, and I didn't act like an idiot.
That's a good
But
testament to you. Okay, great.
yeah, yeah. But I was a marketer, so I was doing, I was blogging, I was going to a lot of networking events. I aligned myself with some other organizations that could send me clients. I let's see, what are some of the other things? Well, because I was a marketer, I was doing a lot in terms of branding. I
Okay.
initially used, sort of one of those online, logo things, but as soon as I sort of had enough cash flow, I hired a very experienced graphic designer to help me, really think through on a very high
Right.
level what I wanted my brand to stand for. And,
Sure.
she helped me to develop that. I've used LinkedIn quite a lot
Okay.
for lead generation. And, and then I've written a book. I'm doing a lot of appearances on podcasts. And now
Okay.
I've launched my own podcast, which is called Marketing Mambo, and that's kind of playing off my former career as a marketer, and I suppose it's my present career too, because I think when you're an entrepreneur, you're a 100% marketer as well. If you want to make money, you got to be marketing.
You gotta be
But
always be
you got
marketing.
to
I have a
always be
friend.
marketing.
Well, one of my best friends runs a very successful real estate business, and his motto is "always be branding." And you say,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that is correct. Always be branding.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, I mean, the marketing mambo really just is the intersection of, I love marketing. And actually, I was talking with one of my clients who's a marketing consultant recently, and we just sort of got off on this, tangent discussion about the intersection of marketing and technology. And it was just such an interesting conversation. And I was like, man, this is good stuff. And we were just joking about how, wow, this would make a really good podcast. And so actually I just her episode's coming out in 2 weeks. we
That's
did
awesome.
we did a podcast of it, but I have such a strong network in the marketing world that I just realized I know so many people that are really interesting that can talk about different aspects of
Right.
marketing. So I just decided to do that, and it's a good thing because people get to know me, but I also just get to talk about something that I love with super interesting people, and I
I
hope
love
that when
that.
people listen to it, that they're going to learn something.
Right. When I talk a lot, when I talk to brands and executives, and we talk about their marketing goals and their business goals, the very first question I ask them is, okay, well, what's the goal that you're working for? What's the point that you're going to know that you are achieving success? Not necessarily that you've
Mm-hmm.
achieved success, because success is a
Mm-hmm.
constantly growing plane. But at what point are you going to be able to look back and say, well, I hit that milestone. I'm achieving success. Now I'm moving on to
Mm-hmm.
that next stage. What's your success for you? In other words, where do you see your business growing?
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to how would you like to see yourself in this industry in the next 3, 5, 10 years down the road?
That's a great question. And I've always uh, had a hard time with the, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Because I'm somebody that really tries to stay in the moment and see, like, what am I liking doing? What am I
Right.
enjoying? But I think that I could probably answer that question in terms of how I want to feel.
Yeah.
And the way I want to feel is that I'm in the flow. I am working with people that I really enjoy working with. They are getting the results that they come to me for, meaning that they're feeling successful and satisfied and less stressed than they were when they came to me. And, they're seeing the results in their business.
Right.
Um, and then let's see, what else there was. Oh, I know. And the other thing that I'm learning, I love learning. I love new challenges, and any direction that I can go in where I'm just and also like interacting with smart, interesting people. That's a huge
I love that. Right.
satisfier for me in my career.
That's great. What are some of your highlights that you can share so far? In other words, when you look back and you say, and you're saying, wow, that was a really good moment for me. That really helped,
Mhm.
springboard me to the next step. That made me feel really happy and successful. What were some of those milestones along your path that that you look back on and say those were amazing spots?
You mean like for me personally, or for my
Well, like
clients?
as a person within your field. In other words, whether it's for you, it could have been working for your clients, whatever it is. But
Mhm.
like, because let me put this into a context a bit. Is that I'm a big believer in celebrating successes. Even
Mhm.
if they're small, you celebrate them because people
Yeah.
need to celebrate victories in order to continue winning. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
If you never have an opportunity to celebrate your success, you're just going to, at a certain point, you're just going to get stuck and burnt out because you have no
Mhm.
concept of am I doing good? You have no
Mhm.
understanding. So that ability to celebrate victories, even
Mhm.
small, I is a huge important step within your process. So what was a victory or two that maybe that you felt good about celebrating throughout this process of business building?
Well, I think that the publishing of my book back in April of 2020 was a big milestone, and it's opened a lot of doors for me. And I would say that it was really, I actually, um, the book started as me blogging. When I first left my job, I blogged for a couple of years, and somebody opened my eyes up to the fact after I'd been blogging for a while that I probably had enough content for a book. And of
Right.
course I did, I used those as the seeds for the book. That wasn't, I didn't download it and publish it. Um,
Right.
and I wrote a lot more, but that that was really cool to think like, oh, okay, I'm really I when I was blogging, I actually was getting feedback from people on different topics that were saying like, "Wow, this is you like nailed exactly how I feel." And so
Right.
it felt good for that to be resonating. And putting the book out. I mean, just actually having it physically there. It's available all over the world.
That's a
Um,
huge success. That's
it's
not that's not a
huge.
small victory. That is
No,
a huge
it's
success. That is
it,
awesome.
yeah, it really is. And I mean, and it's thrilling. And for me, again, I mean, I'm serious about business. I love business, but really, I think what drives me is to help people. Like, I really want people to be happy. I want them to step fully into their potential. I don't want them to be held back by limiting beliefs. And that's my purpose, really, to help people not only be successful, but also be happy in what
Right.
they're doing. And so to have my thoughts and my tips and stories of other people that I interviewed for the book to be out there in the world, as this advocate, that I don't have to have the conversation, people can find the
Right.
book and learn from it. That's very, very satisfying.
Yeah.
And then when I realized, when I started, I guess, promoting the book and being able to get quoted in articles, in a lot of big publications, I was pretty thrilled by that. You definitely feel legitimate whenever
Right.
you're getting quoted in Psychology Today or the Chicago Tribune. That was,
Sure.
it's exciting. But I would say that if I look at what I feel like my big successes are, it's where I have helped people. It's where I actually got a note from one of my clients yesterday who just accepted a new job. And when
Yeah.
we first started working together, I mean, I work with people from an executive coaching standpoint, meaning like they're in a role
Sure.
and they want to be more effective in the role. So I'm helping them with skill development or whatever. And I also work with people that are maybe want to do something different with their careers. And this client sent me a note that he got this job at this digital strategy agency, and it's really what he wanted to do for a long time. But
Yeah.
we'd worked together about a year ago, and he had a really interesting background. He worked in marketing, but he had actually um, done something very different before. And just our work together, he was able to sort of look around him and find a career path that was a better fit for him. And it happened like all he did was call somebody and they were like, "Oh my gosh, we love you. We're going to hire you." And I listen, when this has happened a number of times with people that I've worked with, and I, like you, I'm very optimistic and I'm creative. I like to brainstorm and I think things
Sure.
are, anything's possible. And but, sometimes I mean, I can't guarantee that something
Right.
miraculous is going to happen for somebody, but it does. A lot of times it
But I
does.
cross my fingers all the
I
time.
do. I do. And that's,
Right.
I'm amazed at it, but and it encourages me to continue to be optimistic on behalf of my clients and also to help them stay in that very positive mindset, to stay in that solutions oriented mindset and not like retreat into the cave where they want to avoid things or feel defensive, or because that kind of behavior drains energy away from one's ability to focus on solutions.
Yeah.
And, going back to what we were saying before about, acknowledging emotions, if you don't acknowledge and normalize an emotion,
Hmm.
it stands in the way of being able to take productive action, right?
Right.
If you're feeling really angry, you're not going to have any energy to say like, okay, I just have to deal with this, right?
Right.
You're just going to be like, oh, why'd they do this to me, right? And that doesn't really result in positive outcomes.
Right.
Um, so I really try to, meet people where they are. Yeah, sure, it's natural to be scared.
Sure.
It's normal. People feel this way. Now what are we going to do about it? Okay, like what's the
Smart.
problem? What can we do
Right.
about it?
Right. So, okay. So someone is considering whether they need a coach or they don't need a coach, right? And they're coming to
Hmm.
you. Okay.
Hmm.
And they're gonna start asking you questions to see if
Hmm.
this is a good fit or whatever it is.
Hmm.
What are you looking for? In other words, in a client, what are the things that you're trying to give over to them to let them know that, this is going to be successful?
Well, I mean, I ask a lot of questions about what the person's situation is currently. What have they tried? What would success look like in the future? What's holding them back from doing that?
Yeah.
And, I'm sort of listening and evaluating for whether I feel like this person can, has the self awareness or is willing to, really look at themselves, and also whether whether I can gauge whether I think they're going to take action towards that goal. I mean, somebody who
Right.
comes in that's feeling very victimy. I mean, again, sometimes I think that we can spend some time processing that, right?
Okay.
Because often, maybe we are victims, right? Maybe we have been done wrong in some way. But if somebody doesn't have the willingness to shift out of that at some point and start
Yeah.
looking at like taking responsibility for their own situation, and then it's not really, in my opinion, it's not a good fit for coaching. It might be maybe doing some therapy might be
Sure.
helpful. And I've had clients that have, they go to therapy and they come to me, right?
Right.
And we sort of, I'm sure whatever we talk about in coaching isn't exactly what they talk about in therapy, obviously.
Right.
But sometimes there's a little bit, I'm not a therapist, but sometimes there's a little bit of
Overlap.
overlap there of
Yeah.
just dealing with the feelings or whatever. And that's fine, but it's always with a
Awesome.
focus on what's the action going to
Right.
be that's going to get you to your goal. And, again, I am like looking at, let's get clear on your goal, right? If people
Okay.
come and they're like, oh, I really don't know what I want. And I'm like, oh, well, if you can't get clear on what it is that you want, I don't want you to waste your time and energy, you know, just talking to me, right? Like, I
Right.
really want us to develop a roadmap to get to
Right.
that goal and start taking action to get there.
Right. So if you were getting up in front of a room of people and you had 5 minutes just to, talk about, chat about, give them some inspiration, give them some advice, give them some practical tips, what would be some things that you would tell them in order to help them start their process?
Well, the first thing that I would say is what you want matters.
Okay.
So often with, especially with high achieving people, we and I speak for myself, that we over time learn to focus very much on what people outside of us expect. What do our parents expect? What does our teacher expect? What do we need to do to get into this good school? What do we need to do to get interview at this company?
Right.
And at some point, it's critical to shift that back to what do I think? What's
Right.
important to me? And
Right.
usually when people are what I call, I mean, I actually say I work with people that are successful but not satisfied. And usually when they're in that situation, it's because they have lost touch with what makes them happy.
Right.
And a lot of times what drives that can be that that they're sort of afraid that if they allow what makes them happy to enter into the equation, that they'll lose the success that they've had. And
Yeah, but that's not true. See, you can't lead
not
other
true.
people. You can't lead other people unless you know how to lead yourself first. If you're falling apart, there's no way you're going to be
Mhm.
effective with other people that you're trying to
No,
work with.
that's absolutely right. And one of the other areas that I focus on really commonly with people is what I call the leverage points, which
Okay.
is how are you going to get more out of your investment of time and energy, and how you use the resources that have been entrusted to you. And
Right.
we touched on this a little bit earlier, that sometimes people feel like, oh well, I can just do that faster, or I know how to do that, or it's got to be done the way I do it. And you have to, as a leader, you've got to say, what is it that
Yeah.
only I can do? Only I
Right.
can do. And it doesn't
Right.
matter if you're delegating to someone that it's going to take them, 2 or 3 times as long to do it as you. If you never delegate, they're never going to learn it. And it's not
No.
going to free you up to think
Right.
about, like, what's the next innovation, or, what's the, how are we going to tweak the strategy?
Right.
Things that only the leader can do.
Right. Look, if you're happy just being what you are, and you don't care about growing, you don't care about, continued growth of success, whatever it is, and you're happy just, you know, milling around at the spot where you are, so then yes, keep doing. You want to do everything yourself?
Right.
Keep doing it yourself. That's
Yeah.
fine. You don't want to delegate. No one could do it as good as you. That's fine. No problem. But just
Yeah.
know, that by doing that, you're not going to go anywhere. You know what I mean?
You're
Like,
limiting yourself. Yeah,
yeah,
it's like trying to drive with the parking brake on.
yeah,
You can drive, you're just not
yeah.
gonna go very fast.
But you know what? Some people are really happy doing that. And you know what? If that makes you happy, then amazing. I'm not telling you to do anything different. If that's what you want and that works for you, do it. You know what I mean? But if you're someone who has future goals, if you're someone who is looking for a scalable and sustainable road to success and growth, maintaining that model is not going to help you at all, and you're
No,
just going to get
it's
stuck, and you're never going to get to the point that
right,
you want to get to.
right. And what I would say is, when you said that, people are happy doing this, sometimes people, they're not really happy doing that, but they believe that that's the only option for them. And I really challenge people to dig into that and say, is that really true? What's
Right.
really underneath of this? Is it a fear that if you delegate that you won't have a purpose? If
Right.
Is it a fear that somebody's gonna supplant you, if you trust somebody who works for you, that they're gonna you're not going to look as good? Like, you really need to get to what's at the root of this and deal with that.
Right.
Because, most of the time, and it's sort of funny too, because sometimes when I work with people and I say, like, what's the worst thing that could happen? And, they, oh, this could happen, I could lose my business, or, all my clients could, abandon me, or I could get fired. And then as soon as I say it out loud, I say, how likely is that? Like, you know, you just had the best year ever last year in sales. How likely is it that all of your clients are going to abandon you? And then they kind of laugh
Right.
and they're like, oh, you're right. You're right. And I'm like, it's natural to have fears, but like, bring them out into the open and look at them objectively, right? And do like a
Right.
cost benefit analysis of the things that you're considering doing. And if
Right.
if the risk of failure is low, and then just go forward and have a contingency plan if things seem to go a
Right.
little awry. Like, okay, well, if this happens, what are we going to do? Right. But go
Yeah.
forward, go forward.
Yeah, 100. I believe that. The only thing I would add to that is when you're looking at that assessment, look at it with optimism, but look at it with truth. In other
Yes.
words, don't try to sell yourself something that's not there because
Yes.
it makes you feel good. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Because that also is not gonna help you out with with your steps to to success either.
No, you definitely have to do your due diligence, and you have to think about the best and worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And I know that some people have a tendency to either be, glass half full or glass half empty, but you've got to look at both
Right.
and allow both of those to kind of go into your decision about what you're going to do going forward.
Got it. 100%. So tell me about your book, Winning the Game of Work. Where did that come from? What does that mean? What are you trying to get? What do you want people to know and to do after, reading this book?
Well, I start the book by saying get clear on what it is that you want, because people that don't feel like they're winning at work a lot of times are on a path towards something that they believe is going to make them successful, because somebody's told them that. And a lot of times it's not rooted in something that's very authentic and that they feel very connected to. And I mean, just as an example, I've had clients before who, got on the path for their career because their parents said, hey, do this, become an accountant because the accountants make a good living. And they never really connected to say, like, is that something that I feel happy and passionate
Right.
about? And not necessarily that you have to have passion for your job, but you have to realize you're going to be doing it for a long time.
Right.
And, I've seen a lot of people that have become too successful to make an easy pivot to do something different. It's not that it can't
Interesting.
be done, but really start with what it is that you want,
Right.
and believe that it's possible. That's kind of the beginning. And then the other things are that, and this kind of goes back to what my experience was in the corporate world, which was, I mentioned it earlier. I was confused about what I needed to do to move up. I was doing the things that I thought I needed to do, and it really was around
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm gonna work really hard. I'm going to keep my head down, and I'll be noted. Like the quality of my work will just speak for itself. That doesn't happen. You've got to learn the sort of unwritten rules of the game, which, you've got to learn to advocate for yourself. You've got to learn to build a
Right.
network of advocates for you. You need
Right.
to understand, how does what you do fit into the overall environment of what's going on in the workplace.
Yeah.
One that's really important, and I mean, for business owners, I don't think that this is rocket science, but for a lot of people that might work within your organizations, it might be. I tell people, listen, there's only three ways to add value in a business. You're either helping it make money, save money, or reduce risk. And whatever you're doing, connect it to one of those, areas of value. And I
Right.
think that that's a mistake that a lot of people make when, they're asking for a raise. Oh, I've been
Right.
working really hard, like I took, now I did all of the birthday parties for the company last year. Like that did not help the
Okay.
company make money, save money, or reduce risk.
Okay.
That, I mean, that's a nice thing to have, but I really encourage people to think about, and as much as possible, demonstrate the return on the investment of the things that
Right.
they've done.
Smart.
And
I think that's good advice.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, the book is filled with lots of tips and
Right.
stories and exercises that people can use to sort of look at themselves and think about
Right.
what they want to do, but then evaluate how they're doing
Right.
as well.
That's great. That's fabulous. Terry, it is I am so glad that you came on this show. It's been so good to talk to you. You clearly are a wealth of information. And I've learned so much just from having this conversation with you. It was really, really fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. If someone wants to get in touch with you, how do they find you?
They can find me at my website, which is terrybmcdougall.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, and my handle there is Terry B. McDougall.
Got it. What does the B stand for?
Boyle. That's my maiden name. You can say, I guess we're kind of Irish in my family. Boyle
Got
McDougall.
it. That's that's awesome. Well, fantastic. I'm really glad that you came on the show today. Thank you for taking the time. I am looking forward to continuing this conversation with you, and and getting to hear and see all the amazing things that you continue to take part of, and to future that success. It's been fantastic. So thank you.
Aaron, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Take care.
Okay.
Okay. How was that?
That's great. I
How
hope
did
that
we
it
do?
met your expectations.
No, it was awesome. Oh my God, it was so great. It was so great. I really enjoyed hanging out with you. This really, I learned so much. I particularly like that piece that you said at the end. You were talking about you contribute to a business in three ways, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's true, right? And that kind of comes
Yep.
down to this point of, well, am I a contributor, or am I a beer? In other words, are you someone who is just, happens to be there and be friendly and people like who
Yeah.
you are and da da da? That's fine. And there's a role for you, doing that. But when it comes to business, you're right. Like, either you are helping the company make money, save money, or reduce risk. And
Right.
I think anyone who's looking to step into that next role of management, those are the things that you have to be thinking about and know how to report on. In
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I will tell you that when I'm working with leaders and companies and say they've got a great idea and they're having a hard time, getting approval for it, I always advise them, like, make the business case, right? Like, a lot of times leaders, obviously they're busy, like the senior leaders, they're busy, and um they don't always know what people under them do, or they don't have a line of sight into the things that are going on at that next level under them.
Right.
And if I'm working with somebody and they're like, oh, I've like proposed this to my boss and he keeps shooting it down, I really suggest, like, what's the business case for it?
Right.
How is this going to help the company make money or save money? Like, lay it out in those terms. And I know in my experience in the corporate world, when I could lay it out in terms of dollars, dollars saved or dollars
Right.
earned, those were the things that got approved the fastest. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
no-brainer for a very senior level executive. They're like, oh, okay, I invest $10,000 and we can make,
Right.
250. Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
No, look, you have to know how to talk the talk. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, it's not just about knowing the info. You also have to know how to communicate it
right.
in a way that people know how to internalize it. It's not just
Yes.
saying it in a way that makes sense for you. If for you, it's also saying it in a way that people know how to receive that information that makes sense to them also. And I think
Yeah.
that's so clear and obvious.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think one of the other mistakes that people can make sometimes is that they don't simplify things enough for people above them,
Okay.
and you've really got to break it down. And again, if you can break it down to, like, okay, this is how much we're going to save, this is how much we're going to make, and this is what I need you to say yes or no to, and I'm going to lay
Yeah.
out what the situation is, what the action will be and what the result is. Make it simple. I think sometimes people go in and they assume, like, oh, well, the senior level leader, they rose to this level and they know so much, and I'm going to go into a lot of detail. Well, that just confuses them. They're busy. They're busy, and they may not know a lot about IT.
Right.
They might have rose through the sales ranks to get to the head of the business, right? They're leading the business. They didn't do every job in the whole company.
Right. That's so funny. It's true.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the things that I pride myself on in my business is I've done everything in my business, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I'm at the point where I am now. Like, I've touched and I've handled every single aspect of marketing and branding from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, even though I'm not hands-on on all of those pieces anymore, I still am able to effectively manage and oversee
Mhm.
the different projects because I know, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because I'm familiar with it, because I understand it, right? I'm so happy for you to do it, right? But when you when you report back to me and I'm able to give, constructive feedback in a way that makes sense, that really, that helps the
Yeah,
campaign, helps the client.
that's very relevant. And I did the same thing. And, I started as an administrative assistant, and then, I print production buyer and graphic designer and marketing manager all the way up. I've done a lot of things too. I
Right.
will say that in some ways in my own business, I like to learn and I like to have challenges and that kind of thing. But in some ways, I kind of wish I didn't know how to do everything, because then it would be so much easier to delegate. And also, I fully understand. I coach people on things that I need to be coached on.
Right.
It's
Do you ever find that when you're talking to one of your clients, you're really thinking like, "Oh man, this is great information for me. I'm going to start applying all these things that I'm saying."
I have gotten a lot of aha moments for myself in the conversations that I've had with clients, that I've
Right.
begun to understand things on a different level for
Right.
myself because of the transformation that we're going through with my client. And which
Right.
again is like one of the awesome things about being a coach,
No,
you
I
know.
love that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because it's true. Really might understand all of these things that we practice and that we preach and all those things. But there's something special about getting to say it out loud.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, um, when you say something out loud, it really gives you the opportunity to formalize it in a way that that you might not have had the opportunity to otherwise. That's why I find myself talking to myself in the mirror like all the time. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I actually, when people are interviewing, or they've got a big presentation, or they need to go into, pretty high, I don't know, I guess high risk, I don't know if that's the right word, performance appraisal. I'm like, write out what you want to say and practice it in front of the mirror, make it
yeah,
concise, get comfortable with it. Because a lot of times
right,
when people are talking about themselves in particular, they get hung up. And so I'm like,
right,
listen, just get comfortable with what you're going to say, and,
right.
kind of separate yourself from it a little bit, so you don't feel so self-conscious.